An alum of the Feminist Majority Foundation. She had several roles there. Her last role was as the assistant to our president, Eleanor Smeal.
Yay!
Kelsey has had many interesting experiences. I didn't even remember about your experience in Vietnam, but you can mention. And after she left the Feminist Majority Foundation, she got a more permanent job with the UN Foundation. So how about telling us a little about you and your career, Kelsey, where you're from, etc.
Thank you, Sue. So as Sue mentioned, my name is Kelsey, and I worked for the Feminist Majority Foundation when I first moved to DC almost 4 years ago now. I have an educational background in women's and gender studies with a focus in international relations, and used to work for a foundation in Vietnam that works on preventing human trafficking, preventing domestic violence, and promoting lesbian rights in Vietnam. When after leaving the Feminist Majority Foundation, which was a wonderful experience, and I miss Ellie all the time. I texted her yesterday. But I joined the United Nations Foundation, working on their Women's and Girls portfolio for a different campaign, but a campaign that was working on primarily family planning and reproductive health. And that campaign is called the Universal Access Project, if you'd like to look up more. And I am now with a campaign still in the Women's and Girls portfolio at the UN Foundation, but called Girl Up. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. So Girl Up, we call ourselves a global movement by girls for girls. We're very dedicated to making sure that our model is designed by girls around the world. We're a girls' leadership and empowerment program. And we are, I call ourselves UN adjacent. So the United Nations Foundation is not a UN foundation or agency, but works with UN foundations and agencies. We're based in the United States, so we're based in DC, and we have an office in New York to be a little bit closer to UN HQ. And what Girl Up does is a couple of different things. We have training programs for girls in the United States and abroad. This year we are really working on our global brand, so we're translating all of our documents into 5 languages and getting some consultants in country to make sure that our Girl Up programs are responsive to local cultures and customs, and making sure that our programs are really meeting the needs of girls on the ground. So some of the things that we work on are girls' education. That's one of our biggest pillars. So we have a number of different education programs. And the way that we implement these programs is by partnering with UN agencies on the ground. So we work in 6 different countries. They're Guatemala, Ethiopia, Uganda, Malawi, Liberia, and India. And we work with UNHCR, UNFPA, UNESCO, WHO, and a couple of other different agencies, as well as grassroots organizations on the ground to implement these programs. So, for example, we were just in Liberia to visit a program that we are working on at the end of December. And that program, Liberia specifically, has a very low rate of girls in school past 6th or 7th grade. So the program that we're working on in Liberia is sort of a supplemental educational program where girls can go and learn trade skills, so things like sewing, and I know that we have a number of different writing programs that girls can work on to be able to then find a job and have an income. But then there are also educational programs like comprehensive sex and sexuality education programs that are sort of tied up into it. We also do a number of different empowerment programs, so things about helping girls find their voice. And as many boys who will come to the programs, it often tends to be about 80% women, 20% men. We also do sort of respect policy trainings for young boys. We do try to reshift what masculinity means, so shifting masculinity to mean respect and amongst other great things. And so that's a bit about what we do with the UN. Then here in the United States, we have clubs and organizations across the United States and increasingly globally. And our clubs started out in high schools across the United States. That's kind of where it popped up. But then organically, it's sort of rolled into, we have a number of college programs as well. As our girls graduated from high school and joined colleges, they sort of brought their clubs with them and then wrote to us and said, we really love doing this, and there are more people on college campuses that want to get involved. So again, that sort of by girls, for girls, they let us know what they wanted, and we said, great, let's do college programs. So now we have college programs as well, and starting this year, we're starting a young professionals program as our girls, again, are graduating. So the young professionals program is geared toward girls 22 to 35, and it's, again, sort of a training and leadership model, but often works a little bit more on advocacy. So for our girls in the United States, we are, and abroad, we are providing them with advocacy toolkits and training videos, and we bring them to DC once a year to have a hands-on long weekend on the Hill to advocate to their elected members of Congress, which is a really fun day to have 300 girls running down the halls of the congressional buildings. And it's been really, I think, very successful. We had a number of bills that we've been working on passed, which is a tricky thing to do in our current political climate.
I'd say good for you, because those of us who do it for a living are not being very successful.
Well, I've got girls if you if you need some help. We always say that if you've got an issue, we've got girls. And they are really educated on our issues and they write letters, they go to their elected officials offices and speak up. They write op-eds to their local newspapers. So it's really engaging girls within their own communities and issues that they care about that affects them most, and giving them the tools to be able to work on those things. So for example, we are working on right now a bill that would increase funding for refugee girls abroad for their education programs. It is called the Protecting Girls' Access to Education in Vulnerable Settings Act. It has passed the House
Wow.
and is now on the Senate floor a bit indefinitely as of now. But we're hoping that it will pass the Senate soon. We have some bipartisan support for it. So we will see what happens with that. But yeah, I think I'll stop there and see if there are any questions about our programs or about our advocacy.
The ambassador of the UN, who works on behalf of the American people, do you have interaction with her, and is she supportive of your efforts?
Yes, so we've met with Nikki Haley a couple of times since she's been appointed, and she is supportive of our efforts in that the Secretary General is one of the most feminist Secretary Generals we've had to date, and so putting it in that context. So she is supportive. I'm not sure how much of a champion she's going to be for us. I think that's sort of, it's one thing to be verbally supportive in meetings and be willing to meet with us, and quite another to then champion our issues within the UN.
May I compliment you on how well-spoken you are?
Oh, thank you. It's very nice of you. So I think we shall see. I think it's a bit of a waiting game for that, but it's, I think, a silver lining that she has met with us a couple of times since she's been appointed. So that's sort of what we try to keep reminding ourselves.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other
You
you have a program here in Washington DC?
We do.
Where?
Yes. I'm not the programs person, so I work on more communications, and I'm happy to talk more about exactly what I do for Girl Up. But I know that we have a number of programs in DC with high schools and in the sort of like broader DMV area. So
How
I'd
can
be
she
happy to
find
connect
out
you.
about that?
So girlup.org has our contact info, but I'm also happy to give you the email of the programs person.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
So as far as the programs that you have going on in Ethiopia, Malawi, and Nigeria as part of Grow Up, does Grow Up create the content and the curriculum for those sex and sexuality programs, or the local implementing partners on the ground do that, and then through the UN Foundation, Grow Up provides the funding to support those groups?
The latter. So definitely on par with our By Girls for Girls model. The implementing partner is the one who comes up with the curriculum and then proposes it to Girl Up, and we sort of talk through, does it check the boxes for Girl Up, and also for our UN partner that's doing most of the funding and implementing. But yes, we have things that we look for. So Girl Up, the education part, we often have a health and a nutrition and sex and sexuality checkbox as well. But it's the implementing partner who's really leading it. So especially as we're doing this sort of global brand refresh and this global movement, there have been things that we've been learning about. For example, we have a consultant in China who's been saying that we need to kind of model our program as more of the young professionals program, the job experience program, because that's what young people in China are interested in gaining experience that will help them get jobs. Versus in India, there's a lot of funding for and a lot of push for education access. So that's sort of more what we're modeling our programs in India on. Yes.
Is your funding stable, given the...
Yes, so the United Nations Foundation and Girl Up do not receive U.S. funding.
Good.
So that has been, both a challenge and, whatnot. But so Girl Up is funded through a number of different foundations and some private donors, some partnerships that we have with a couple of different private sector groups, who will do campaigns for us and, a portion of their proceeds, that sort of thing.
Let's hear from the next speaker.
Thank you so much. It is so wonderful to be back here at the Clearinghouse. I was here with Pat Ortman with Girls Gotta Run, which was a wonderful event. And I miss Kelly McIntosh, as we all do, who is a real energy bunny, energizer bunny. And I will convey how much we miss her, but it's a good time to be away from this country. Again, my name is Wendy Lesko, and I am one of the co-founders of Schoolgirls Unite, which is the international initiative of the national nonprofit called the Youth Activism Project. And our organization encourages young people of all genders to really work on policy advocacy. But our Schoolgirls Unite effort is what I want to just share a few stories. And in contrast to Girl Up, we are like this little tiny micro baby. But we are a tiny and demanding, very much girl-led organization. And we started in 2004 with a group of 7th graders. And so we have had, in these dozen years, multiple generations. And we only have about 200 girls, primarily in Maryland, a bit in New York and New Jersey, who really devise their campaigns and decide how to fulfill the 2 prongs of our organization, which is philanthropy. We have a scholarship program in Mali, which has seen just tremendous instability in the last 4 years, which has really impacted girls tremendously. But we have provided scholarships for a cohort of 75 girls, all in extreme poverty in rural areas. And that we've had about 20 who have gone through 9th grade and passed. And to give you a sense, that doesn't sound all that tremendous, but in this area of Mali, 0.03% of girls pass 9th grade. So, and most of these girls have the most important thing that Girl Up is so involved with and has played such an important role is they have delayed being married. And that is the biggest life-threatening and life potential growth to any girl. Every single month of school, every single year of school, even if it's bad education, if they are staying away from a man, an uncle, a 60-year-old type, that is actual success, more than education itself. It's the power of that independence and exposure, at least to a broader world than one's own immediate family. So, just to give you a sense of our progression, in 2004, when we started, the girls decided to buy pencils in bulk and sell them in front of grocery stores. Now they hold film screenings and critical dialogues. So What Tomorrow Brings, Girl Rising, the Malala films. These are films that they use, and they design their own school-wide assemblies often and show excerpts and then really engage their peers in talking about these issues. When we started, we would set up meetings on the Hill, which still is probably the most exciting, empowering aspect, because most school clubs and groups fundraise. That is a pretty comfortable thing. Going to the Hill is not, especially if you're with, especially now. But, for those who are real supporters, they are pleased to see us, but it's like the docket is full. We really need to reach out to the members of Congress in Idaho and in South Dakota, and that is a real struggle for our East Coast centric organization. But now, over the years, the girls have learned from one another in these multiple generations, and so now they are the ones scheduling the meetings. And they know how much time that takes to be persistent with schedulers. They are the ones who are creating, like on our schoolgirlsunite.org website, one of our 8th graders created a guide on how to make your letter to a member of Congress stand out. And she was part of lobbying for many years on something called the READ Act, which back in 2004, it was called the Education for All, and didn't talk about national security, right? But now everything is about national security. So these girls, what I love is they do pass the torch from those who are in college are now mentoring the high school. The high school have all this synergy with middle school girls. We have a partner organization in Mali that totally runs our scholarship program, and they're all now women in their late 20s. And together we wrote a Girls Gone Activist, which is a free download. It's an action guide designed for anyone who wants to work on any issue, but this focuses on the example of the importance of education for girls. So Girls Gone Activist, that bilingual action guide, has really had a wonderful ripple effect being downloaded by people all over the world. And now we've sort of graduated, and I'll pass this book around. Schoolgirls Unite was featured in Wonder Girls, which is written by 11-year-old Alexis Sangster and her grandmother, Paolo Gianturca. And she profiles 15 organizations run totally by girls around the world. And we were really chosen by her. I tried to talk her out of it because I said, we're very fragile and, we're not this big engine. And she really believes in our sort of, again, how youth-driven it is and how we do make mistakes and we learn from those mistakes and we push the envelope quite a bit. And she, because of Schoolgirls Unite campaign back in 2011 to really push for U.S. support for the International Day of the Girl and get the U.S. to actually sponsor this UN resolution, which ultimately it did. She features that in her book, this chapter about Schoolgirls Unite, and launched her book here on Day of the Girl with Women Thrive and the Women's Giving Circle of Howard County. And so we had some great events. But the two co-founders of Schoolgirls Unite, when they were 7th graders, were paid staffers for that national grassroots campaign. And I'm delighted to say that Anika Manzoor, who was one of those paid staffers when she was in college, she will move in as executive director of the Youth Activism Project in June when she graduates from the Kennedy School of Government with her master's degree. And she will be the face of the Youth Activism Project. And what we are trying to do is learn lessons from Schoolgirls Unite, which tends not to be, in our view, reciprocal enough. It is still too Western dominated. And so the scholarship program alone changes that whole power dynamic. So we have just launched a pilot program with one of our chapters that is working with this awesome school in India, in Lucknow. And these girls who all work half a day and go to school half a day, they come on Saturdays for feminist pedagogy and critical dialogue. So together, these groups, these two chapters, are working in digital exchange on a weekly basis, exchanging YouTube videos and emails. And it's a big experiment. It probably will fall flat on our face, but this activism across borders in really trying to create this bilateral partnership is the next frontier that we're building from Schoolgirls Unite. So it's we're really excited and horrified by the current U.S. Situation, but we will continue.
Thank you, thank you.
Yep.
So I'm Gabby Grepsky, and thank you for also allowing me to talk about Girls Gotta Run. Compared, if Schoolgirls Unite is small compared to Girl Up, Girls Gotta Run is even smaller than Girls Unite, Schoolgirls Unite. But I've been involved with the organization since 2009, and I've had the privilege of actually traveling to Ethiopia and meeting some of the girls we support there for 3 years. But it was actually started in 2006. A Washington Post journalist, Emily Wax, spent some time in Addis Ababa and noticed some girls running around throughout the city, and sometimes by themselves and sometimes in groups, and she got to know some of them. And they're not even running in running shoes. They're running in, not flip-flops, but sandals and, like Crocs or something kind of broken down. And so she started finding out that some of these girls, or a lot of these girls had come in from the countryside or rural areas to Addis Ababa, which presents some safety issues in and of itself, but trying to get seen by a coach and get onto one of these running teams. And I don't know how much everyone here knows about the running world, but Ethiopia and Kenya are known for their runners, right? Olympians and world record holders. So I think those folks like Tirinish Dibaba or women and Meseret Defar are idols to these girls all over the country. And so these girls are kind of coming into the city really trying to kind of make it big and be the next Meseret Defar and Tirinish Dibaba. And leaving their families. Some of their families know. Some of them are actually leaving without telling their families. So she got to know some of them and came back and wrote an article about it. And Pat Ortman, who I think you met, kind of was just very inspired by these girls and wanted to see and trying to think of things that she could do to support them. So she founded Girls Gotta Run Foundation. And initially, it sort of evolved over time. Initially, we went in just kind of saying, what can we do to support these girls? Like, we're so inspired by these girls taking the initiative to try and change their lives and break the cycle of poverty. And education wasn't quite involved, or wasn't as big a piece in the beginning. And so these girls were getting into these running camps, and so we were kind of supporting them, providing them with, sports bras, really basic stuff. They were running, they didn't have any of that equipment, running shoes, shorts and T-shirts and food. I mean, a lot of these girls are malnourished, so providing them with food to buy, money to buy food. But we found that there were some challenges with that, and we felt that most of these girls are not going to become the next Tirinish Dibaba. And so, what do we do when the running career's over? So we definitely decided that we needed to focus a lot more on the education piece, and it was a bit of a focus, but we made it a much bigger focus. And so it has sort of evolved into this academic scholarship program. Where So we basically, and we're in two cities in Soto and Bikoji. And Bikoji is one of the areas that is sort of this hotbed and produces a lot of the famous runners that you hear about and see running in the Olympics. And so we sort of focus on this 3-year period. And again, we're a very small grassroots organization, don't have a lot of resources, so we decided we're not really capable of following these girls from primary school all the way through secondary school and providing fees for that. So we kind of go all in for about 3 years, around the time that these girls are most likely to drop out of school, which is the ages of 11 to 13 for most of them. So what we do is when I say all in, so this academic scholarship will provide a lot of different resources in terms of tuition for schools, uniforms, books, school supplies. We also try to provide tutoring services for the girls who really need tutoring services, access to libraries in the town that they're in, school clubs. We just want them to be as involved in the school community as possible. We've also introduced a life skills training curriculum to them, and it's through the Center of Creative Leadership that is based in Addis Ababa. And so a female skills mentor comes in and talks to the girls about all kinds of issues around family planning, HIV prevention, I don't want to leave anything out, nutrition, financial literacy, healthy relationships, leadership, creative expression. They want these girls to kind of find their voice and use them. We also provide healthcare. We found that healthcare is also a huge obstacle, not only just for the girls, but for the moms or a parent. A lot of these girls are coming from single parent homes. So if the mom gets sick, a lot of times that's a reason to that the girls drop out of school. So really trying to provide the health care that both the girls and the families need. Daily meals, showers, a place to wash their clothes, running clothes, definitely providing them some running clothes. We've partnered with organizations like Oiselle, and I don't know if anyone's heard of them, but they're a running company based out in Seattle, and they're very focused on women's running clothes, and they've sort of branched out and also about female empowerment here in the U.S., but they've also taken us kind of under their wing, so they've supplied us with a lot of really great clothes for the girls. Hygiene products, both reusable and non-reusable. Entrance and transportation to Ethiopian races, which seems like maybe a little thing, but many of these girls have never been out of their communities, so it gives them exposure to something outside of their family community and their school community. We actually, a graduate from one of our previous running camps, Dinkanesh, has actually went out a couple years ago and won the Dubai Marathon, so she was a big, huge success story, and so we're hoping to have more of those. Also opportunities to peer-to-peer mentoring. So the life skills training curriculum happens for about a year, and then the girls who have gone through it actually come back the following year and then start to teach the younger girls who are coming in, to kind of teach them public speaking skills, maybe teaching skills, and so they stay involved and act as role models for the younger girls coming in. They obviously have access to running coaches and female mentors. Right now in Bikoji, they have the first female ever running coach for the girls, which is a big deal because a lot of the coaches are men in the country. And then we also we found that trying to kind of get the parents involved too has been really helpful. So there's a women's savings and entrepreneurship program for the moms, and we're trying to basically teach them the same skills that we're teaching the girls around entrepreneurship, financial literacy, kind of having a voice, and then obviously the opportunity to run and train. We definitely want that to be a big part of it. Like I said, the girls in the program range in age from 11 to 18, and like I said, the majority of them come in around the age of 13. There's a whole selection process. What we do is first the girls with high potential but high need girls, so girls coming from poor socioeconomic backgrounds, and that may include coming from a family where parents are uneducated, maybe a single family, a single parent household. Maybe mom is uneducated or unemployed or both. Maybe mom is living with HIV. Maybe mom rents instead of owns her property, so she doesn't own property. So girls like that. So we're looking for the high need but high potential girls. When I say high potential girls, girls who are really already sort of invested in their education. And because we are so small and grassroots, we kind of need to focus on those girls because we don't really have the resources to kind of branch out right now. So these girls have to have a good attendance record. And again, we're working with schools in these areas, so the schools are actually identifying these girls for us. So they have to have a good attendance record, they have to be motivated to keep going to school, and the parents and the families have to be advocates for education. They have to want their kids to stay in school. And they also have to be willing to run and be a part of the team. And we found that that's just been really good in terms of obviously the physical health side of it, but also promoting confidence, a work ethic, character, like kind of being a part of a team and contributing to a team. And I remember being up in the Simeon Mountains back in 2010 or 11, visiting some of the girls. It was my third time up there. So the girls kind of like would take me around to their homes, and we were walking through the marketplace, and there was a group of boys kind of catcalling the girls. And I kind of stood back to kind of watch what they would do. And the girls looked over, and they just like rolled their eyes and were like, we can run faster than them. And they just kind of kept going. So it was like super cute that I felt like, wow, that was like a good response, as opposed, I think normally they might like kind of like cower away or kind of scurry away, and they were like not impressed by the voice. So I thought that was like a neat response. And let's see, yeah. So Soto and Bikoji, two of the reasons we're focusing, the reasons we're focusing in Soto is there is a large like kind of family planning issue there that the government is actually also trying to play a role in right now. And in Bikoji, they also early child marriage is also a huge issue there. The average age of marriage for a girl is 14 right now, and so that's something that, and again, for all kinds of reasons. A lot of times these girls are being kidnapped. Sometimes for financial reasons, the family needs to marry off the girls, but sometimes for safety reasons. A lot of times these parents feel that their child is actually, or their girls are going to be safer if they actually marry them off. So I think a lot of these families actually do want to send their girls to school and support education, but just might feel like they can't either, socially and there's a lot of peer pressure, or not peer pressure, but societal pressure from the communities to pull their girls out of school. So. But we work, again, we have partnerships within the country because I think that's super important. We work with the athletics office, the education office, there's a women and children's office, so we want to make sure that they're involved. And again, like I said, the Center for Creative Leadership in Addis Ababa comes and works with us, and they're the ones who provide the curriculum for the training, for the year-long training. Let's see, I think, we do some monitoring and evaluation to make sure that for some quality control, Kayla Nolan, who's our executive director, actually lived in Ethiopia for several years to kind of get this program off the ground, and now she's since come back to the U.S. and goes back twice a year, for a couple months, to kind of monitor what's going on. I know the local governments require progress reports from our staff, and what's been neat is we've been able to hire staff within the country, so locals who are coming in, so the coaches, we have a program manager, we have a couple of female mentors, and an accountant who's like helping look after the girls and run the program, so that's actually been really, we're proud of that. And so the impact, so our first cohort of girls graduated about a year ago, and we were happy to report that 15 of them stayed in school and are now going on to 11th and 12th grade. So so in 10th grade is kind of the bare minimum in Ethiopia to be able to like kind of get a job, like a good job. And so our goal is to get them through 10th grade at a bare minimum, but our hope is that they continue to go on to 11th and 12th grade, which is more like kind of a university track where they're kind of really learning a career. And so all 15 of them are on track to go to 11th and 12th grade, which is really exciting, and none of them have gotten married, so they're on track to get a career or have a career. So the next step for us is to really try and continue to support these girls once they get into 11th and 12th grade, and then eventually on into college if some of them want to go on and pursue their education further. But our main goal is really to prevent child marriage and really promote high school or secondary school retention. So. And then I do have a video. I know on here it said that I have a video that kind of highlights everything that I just said, and I don't know if you want it.
Because we're involved with several coalitions here in DC, the Global Campaign for Education and the Violence Against Women Coalition and Girls Not Brides. But for instance, we actually have a number of chapters who have sort of merged with Girl Up or vice versa. And so they're really working pretty organically, not in a structured way, but they just come together and know that working together collaboratively is what we need to do. And they're also quite concerned about getting more boys involved in this movement. And so some of our chapters actually call themselves Global Equality now as a way to try to engage boys, but generally the volunteer index for high school girls, it's 60 to 70% versus boys. So it's always a struggle.
And I would only add that Girl Up was also a part of a number of different coalitions. I can think of the Coalition for Adolescent Girls off the top of my head, and a number of others. So we definitely, where it makes sense and where obviously were able to participate, then we do have these sort of like overlapping things. But as you mentioned, these things often organically pop up. The girls are always light years ahead of us, so
Yes.
they're often doing it on the ground before we even know about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually talked to Julie about whether Girls Gotta Run could partner with Girl Up, and I think you guys work very specifically with girls from UNHCHR, and so so we didn't quite fit in that, but we do definitely. Yeah, I think partnering is huge and very important. But yeah, but Julie said she was gonna try and figure out a way if that could work.
You talked about the 11th and 12th grade being
Yeah.
a separate track. Is that a separate school, or do the girls just withdraw after?
Yeah, a lot of times they would. I'm not always a separate school, but a lot of times they do withdraw, just from funds or just lack of resources. They just can't go that far, and are just needed back at home. A lot of times I think it's just resources. They just don't have the money to continue, which is why that's the next phase for us. And what we're doing, and part of what we're trying to incorporate, like the entrepreneurship group, women's group with them, is so that they can actually figure out ways to kind of support themselves, so they're not relying on an outside source to provide money. Like I think, obviously it's more sustainable if they can figure out ways to support themselves and provide their own tuition fees and raise their own tuition fees.
And one challenge for girls around the world is that often upper secondary school, they are not located in local villages. They have to
Right.
travel,
Yeah.
go to big
Yeah.
cities, so the potential for trafficking and all kinds of horrors on top of everything else really is a problem. And similarly, many of our girls who've completed 9th grade are now working in the hotel industry. They've got jobs. They're not great jobs, but they're employed.
Something.
Right.
Other questions around?
Well, I have a follow-up question. Do you, is there any sort of STAR curriculum materials that form the basis? I know they would have to be translated into different languages and used sensitively for different cultures, but are there some basic curriculum or training materials that have been tested to be most effective? For example, materials on how to relate to boys and involve them, or, are there any STAR materials that you all use in common?
And I think that's a great question. I actually asked Kayla to forward it to me, and I didn't get a chance to get it from her before today. But I do think what's tough is, I think, again, we're having to be very sensitive to that kind of imposing our Western beliefs on a different culture. And I know that, Ethiopia is a very religious country, and so talking about contraception there can be very tricky. Obviously, we know that it...
It's tricky everywhere.
Yeah.
So trying to figure out ways to, there's just so many cultural, I think, barriers there. So I do think that that's why it helps. That's why I think it's important for us to partner with the center there in Addis, so that they have figured out ways. And I think coming from locals and Ethiopians versus like a Westerner can also be helpful too. So I do think, I don't have my curriculum with me, but.
We have toolkits for our girls in the United States, and we're translating those toolkits where it's appropriate. But we rely really heavily on our in-country consultants to be the ones who are kind of creating the curriculum, because as you so rightly mentioned, it changes, depending on which country, the country context. And we, Girl Up never wants to be the ones saying that this one-size-fits-all model is going to work for you, now go do it. So we defer to our experts in the country.
And in the case of Schoolgirls Unite, the girls themselves actually write advocacy toolkits more on how to, in the case for Mali, how you can talk with the Ministry of Education on their curriculum. So we get them to drive that in-country piece. But I think one of the reasons there are so many groups, and this issue is we're all playing with it in such different ways, but it's all for the same goal. That is so much a part of, I think, the nonprofit movement, that it's this proliferation, and when you have girl-led stuff, it's just going in lots of directions. And there's a beauty to it, and there are challenges with it. But another great question that you're challenging us, Sue, with. So, but yes, I can't attest to any one.
I can't either, but even when the curriculum exists, what I found, I've also done a little work in Zambia, in Lusaka, and so there is the Ministry of Education does have curriculum but when it disseminate, like when it gets, when it's given to teachers, and then I was talking to a teacher who had kind of branched off from a community center to create a school with no roof or no ceiling, just kind of some cement walls for girls who are not in school for whatever reason, because they're either HIV positive or orphans, or they have to help their moms at home. She wanted us to talk about health education and consent, like in a way that would work over there, and because a lot of these girls are obviously getting pregnant when they're 13 or 14. And she was like, we can't talk about condoms. But I know the Ministry of Education has a curriculum where they do talk about condoms. And so she's like, you can't talk about condoms because if these girls go home and say that we talked about condoms, I get in trouble. So even though the government is saying that we need to do that, it still hasn't kind of trickled down to like the local communities. And so it was interesting. I mean, that's the same in America, right? I mean, I know a video of a guy because I'm a health educator, so I got to think of like creative ways to do this stuff. And then there's a gym teacher down in, I think it was Alabama or Mississippi, who was teaching his kids how to put on a sock, and he's like, when you're engaging in a shoe activity, like no matter what shoe activity it is, this is how you put on a sock. And so I showed it to one of the high school kids on my trip, and so we go to, do our health education. He's like, Gabby, I got my sock. And so so we showed the kids how to put on a sock, but they all start laughing. They knew what we were talking about, but it was like a way to kind of get around, like, we didn't talk about condoms today, we talked about socks. And so, but the kids got it, and the boys are all like, what if the girl doesn't want to wear a sock, or what if the girl doesn't want you to wear a sock? And I'm like, no sock, no love, or I don't know whatever I was saying, but just kind of getting creative. But it is interesting, those curriculums are out there, but it's still a struggle to actually get them implemented in.
One beacon of hope is our India pilot program. The girls there, they go to math, they learn English, which is their second language or third language, and they have a feminist girls' rights class. And that, right, can you imagine that happening in most public schools in America?
No.
It's
Not
amazing.
here, not here.
So again, what might work in Lafayette, Louisiana would not work in other
But
places. and
that
vice
happens
versa.
even with American programs. I directed a program, and we wanted to provide childcare in California, a big Hispanic population, and the parents don't want someone to take their child and put them into another room while they are attending a meeting. They want the child to quietly sit at their leg. They do not want. So even right here, you'll have those sociological differences, and you have to be very aware of them, or you're really not supporting their efforts. So, yep.
Anne?
Wendy, I want to thank you for bringing the book. I plan to buy one. That's wonderful. So I'm going to order it tonight. But I don't know if any of you heard this morning on NPR this really appalling report that North Korea is, I hate to say exporting young women. On National Public Radio, sorry, Linda. On National Public Radio this morning, there was a piece on the fact that North Korea, to get cash back into their economy, is exporting young women as slaves, and to China in particular. So God knows what they are, whether they're selling them or just. But it's appalling, and since it's North Korea, I don't know that any foundation, but China, if there are programs in China, maybe that would be a way to intervene. It was just a very sad report, and oh my gosh, another volcano hotspot.
Excuse me. In the United States, education is not a federal matter, it's a local matter.
And
It's not-
state.
Local and state. It's not, it wasn't one of the rights in our Constitution. What about the countries that you're working in? Is it a national, if that's the right word, a federal matter? Or like the U.S., is it more local?
In the case of Mali, the Ministry of Education is the purveyor of curriculum. But what happens is in the rural areas, it's one of the poorest countries of the world. So who is teaching in those rural communities are barely educated people. So it doesn't matter what is being passed down. There are very few teacher training programs, And again, to come back to one of the exciting beacons of hope is this high school that we're working with in India. They now have a hub where the girls who now have graduated and have become teachers now are using digital media to train teachers throughout the country of India. And to me, that is with technology, that is the future, because there are not enough people in the teacher pipeline, and there especially are not enough women who are teachers, which perpetuates this whole horror that often happens in terms of gender-based violence in school and child marriage and all of those things.
Did any of you meet Malala? The young Malala?
Malala?
Yeah. Did any of you meet her?
I've not met Malala.
You did?
Yes. I was at the Afghan embassy, and she came with her father, and I talked with her and took pictures. Yes, she's amazing.
Serious?
Yeah, she came and spoke at a school I worked at, and so yeah, she was amazing.
And one of our high school students wrote an essay on why Malala gives me courage. And Malala chose Julia Fine's essay primarily because she talked about how important it was for girls to influence policymakers. And that's why she had, so Julia Fine spent a day in New York with Malala.
Oh, nice.
So, if there are any more questions, okay.
So my question kind of stems from experience. I'm from Madagascar, and I've had the privilege to study in a lot of African countries, including
A little bit
Zambia.
louder, dear. A
Oh,
little
sorry.
bit.
Including Zambia, and I've noticed that a lot of these programs do break cultural, social norms, especially for women, because in a lot of these countries, the norm is that women don't go to school, or they don't go to school past 10th grade. They have to take care of the household, they have to have families. Do you ever provide protection for girls who are enrolled in these programs? Because breaking the cultural and social norms is a little bit dangerous in those countries.
Yeah. So that's a great question, and I think one of the reasons that Girl Up is all of our curriculum is designed by folks, our experts in the country and folks on the ground, to sort of avoid, we won't implement a program that's incredibly dangerous if there's harm to the girls who are at that program. But then we also do things for fundraising for safe transportation to and from these programs. So we provided shuttles and buses in the past, but most often it's providing bicycles. We have a whole fundraising cycle around, it's called our School Cycle program, where we provide girls around the world with bicycles to get to and from these education programs. And we just learned, I was just chatting with someone a couple of weeks ago who also then used her bicycle to bring her brother to the hospital when he had an injury. And so, we do try to address those things, but it's a real serious concern, and it's something that I think it takes these types of great questions to be thinking about and making sure that that's part of everything that we're doing while we're implementing these programs.
We have found in a number of cases that our sister organization in Mali has tried to intervene to stop a child marriage. They made that decision. They did the calculus on whether or not it was worth the risk. And they have only been successful in about 3 cases in getting family agreement for that child not to be married. What they have done is often brokered a deal where, even though this 13-year-old is married, will you still allow her to go to school? And as far as we know from, these are all Malians who are running this program, we feel they are more timid than aggressive. So we put it, quite frankly, in their, we really rely on their intelligence and sense of how dangerous it is. But it's such an important, girls are in such danger in so many ways every day of their lives.
Everywhere.
So, yep.
No kidding.
Yeah, I have to agree with what Kelsey said. I think we rely on the folks on the ground in Soto and Bikoji to, right, the staff we've hired in the schools to kind of look out for the girls. Yeah.
Some of the things that haven't been mentioned, although it was mentioned in the materials, for example, Girls Up pays attention to the registration of girls as individuals, to give them legitimacy. But no one's mentioned FGM these days. Is that no longer much of a problem? Or?
What's a problem here in the States? Was it in Michigan? There's just recently been a case, two
What?
people indicted.
Oh, are you talking about the
FGM.
Nassar thing?
No, female genital mutilation.
Well, actually, that was part of the gymnastics
Oh, was it?
case at Michigan State. I have to forthrightly tell you, though, and I mentioned this to my colleagues at Michigan State. I worked in K-12 education in the state of Michigan Department of Ed for 30 years. We have the most conservative sex ed statute in the United States. It's opt-in, not opt-out. And if we were a mixed group, I'd ask, well, actually, you women, how many of your parents actually talked to you about sex and body parts when you were growing up? Well, we got one. And I have to tell you, in the 5th grade, they gave us misinformation that I took with me to college. And I mentioned it out loud, and someone goes, oh, my God. And, you know, you have to look at the big picture here. Not to just totally defend my alma mater, but I fought tooth and nail to get that statute opened up. Because parents didn't want to do the job themselves, but they didn't want their kids getting any knowledge. And they besmirched me. There was a guy named Bob Lemieux, a former hockey player, who had an interview with the Kalamazoo Gazette, who attacked Roberta Stanley, said just really grossly unkind things about me, upset my father, and he had them write a response in the Coldwater Daily Reporter from where I grew up. I mean, you know, it does take a strong backbone. I will also point out my hometown is now 10% Yemeni. My sister's a middle school teacher. She told me that many of the little girls growing up there never got to middle school. And that if one graduated, they had a big celebration in town. Now that's 10% of the population. And one girl graduates in any given year. So, I mean, they aren't being a culture in the United States either, but, you know, some of our states need to step up to the plate and become modernized.
What do you think our women's groups could do to help you with what you're doing? What would be something that you could ask for?
So we are looking right now to get girls, if you know of amazing teen and early college girls, we have 2 applications out right now. One is for our Y-Side program, which is a STEAM program that happens most often in countries in South and Sub-Saharan Africa. This year it's going to be in Namibia. And so you can apply to become part of that program and apply for funding to attend this program in Namibia. There are 10 countries that are participating, 9 African countries and the United States. And you can also apply to become a teen advisor. We have 20 girls from those that are global. We have 20 girls from around the world who act as our teen advisor and who shape our entire agenda for the year and the things that we focus on. So if you know of teen girls who want to get involved, send them our way.
You said STEM, that's more
STEAM plus the arts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
So is that on your website?
Yes. Yeah, and all of our social platforms.
And we would love to invite anyone to a meetup happy hour at Politics and Prose on Friday, February 2nd. The bookstore is doing a partnership Friday with Intersect, which is our chapter working with the girls in India on gender-based violence and fighting sexual harassment. And that is on Connecticut Avenue, and that's in about 2 weeks. And the girls will be there after school until the bookstore closes at 10, but the happy hour is in the den below, and that's our Youth Activism Project meetup group.
What time's that?
It's 4 to 7 is the happy hour.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for the question, Loretta.
And donation always helps too.
I was going to say, for $600 you can support a girl for a year for an athletic scholarship for a year. So and that covers all the resources that I was talking about. So just because we are so small, like funding is always an issue, and so obviously we always appreciate funds.
So,
What about
Thank you.
corporate sponsorship?
That's that's where we're working. We definitely have grants, and we're working with certain companies like coffee companies and Kayla's
running companies, eh?
Yeah, or running companies, exactly. Yeah, we definitely get a lot of in-kind donations, which is obviously helpful. But yeah, we need to. That's something that Kayla's working on right now.
Have you ever thought about all three of you being on NPR and just really pushing this message out to people so that they can hear about it, or Democracy Now, to spread the word? I mean, these
We've
are
had girls on
wonderful,
our-
wonderful programs. I've learned a lot just sitting here. So, I mean, there's all kinds of marketing that you should be doing. Because you have stories
Well,
to tell.
this show goes on the same channel as Democracy Now, so.
All right.
Okay.
That's
So,
power.
Do you have any last thoughts on how we can all work together and do so much more to help our sisters in countries that really need our help? And also, as we started to discuss, learn from what we've been doing in other countries to improve our own education here in the United States. That's been something I've been doing throughout my career. I love going to meetings focusing on women in developing countries, and I've often learned much more about their strategies and how they use terminology and activities that I then think about how can we apply it here. So any thoughts that you all have would be very welcome.
Sure. I mean, what I think it was mentioned before, I think partnerships are very, very important. I think the more we partner, especially in country, is going to be very important. I think raising awareness of what's going on in these countries. I think we all know that we need to educate girls and, keeping girls in school helps the communities and families in general. But I think storytelling is a really big part of it. I think the more we can get individual stories out there, like I loved listening to your story earlier, because I think that that's very powerful and it's a lot more powerful, and a lot of research has shown like focusing on one story can actually involve more people than just kind of hearing like a group of girls are being impacted in some way. So I do think that trying to figure out a way to get our girls' stories out there and raise more awareness here of what's going on in individual countries can be very helpful.
I commend the Clearinghouse because of the focus on future generations. And I think where we see the change happening from Girl Up and all these other organizations is really allowing girls to be in the driver's seat, and the adults are their supports in the passenger seat. And the more we give them those opportunities to chart new paths, and we have to remember that there's never been such a huge youth bubble in terms of the worldwide population. If we do not engage young girls now to be leaders now, not tomorrow, now, that I think is really one of the promises, and that's from whether it's in Ethiopia or Mali or running for office here in this country.
I could not have said it better myself. I agree completely. I think, getting girls involved in the conversation and making sure that girls are at the table as well when we're having these conversations. I know at Girl Up, they help shape our agenda for the year and the things that we're focusing on. And they, are contributors and writers to our blog. Our blog is completely, comprised of girls and writing about the issues that they care about. We are starting a new editorial series this year called the Girls Get Real series, where they are writing about things that affect them directly and they are most passionate about, and it's going to be a multilingual series, and we're very excited about it. So, all of the speakers that we heard from today are already doing this amazing work, and just making sure that, if you're in a meeting and at a coalition, kind of glancing around the table and, asking yourself, are youth voices being represented? Are they being respected? Are they being invited? Those types of questions.
Can you each now just give me your contact information? Because I don't know if you did do that or not. So go ahead.
Sure. So I'm Gabby Grebsky, and I can be reached at my email is ggrebsky@gmail.com. That's GGREBSKI@gmail.com. And better yet, you can visit girlsgottarun.org at www.girlsgottarun.org.
And we have Wendy Lesko with schoolgirlsunite.org or our national nonprofit, which is theyouthactivismproject.org.
And you can find Girl Up on any social media channel that you are a part of and at girlup.org.
Hey, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you all.
We